Good evening. Welcome to the 44th annual Rooney Prize giving, and the first to be held online. 8 months on from our first lockdown, we're all well used to these online events. They work very well, particularly for occasions like this with citations and readings. Of course, some of our events have had to be shelved this year, but this was never going to happen to the Rooney Prize. We're very possessive of its position as one of the world's longest running literary prizes. Here with us this evening, let me welcome the benefactors of the prize, Peter Rooney and John Curran, who are here with friends. Let me welcome also members of the judging committee, Jonathan Williams, Carlo Gebler, Rosie Lavin, Michael Cronin, Elaine Niculanon and Sinead McKay. Staff from Trinity Development and alumni from the School of English in Trinity College and from our Oscar Wilde Centre for Creative Writing are here too. The Oscar Wilde Centre administers the prize. And of course, this year's winner, who is here with friends and family and publisher. And we'll be hearing shortly from Peter and Carlo and from the winner, who will do a reading. And I hope everyone has some champagne or whatever the preferred drink is ready to toast the winner. The event is being recorded and will be included with the press release in our formal announcement on Thursday. Most of you are very familiar with the Rooney Prize, and for those who aren't, it's awarded for an outstanding body of work by an emerging Irish writer under 40 years of age and is valued at €10,000. The prize has been awarded annually since 1976 through initially the generosity of the late Daniel Rooney, who served as US Ambassador to Ireland, and his wife Patricia. Their nephew, Dr. Peter Rooney, became the benefactor of the Rooney Prize in 2018, continuing the Rooney family's long-established support for Irish literature. Since 2006, the prize has been administered by the Oscar Wilde Centre for Irish Writing of the School of English here in Trinity. It's a tremendous honour for the university to administer this prestigious prize, and an honour we take very seriously. The literature and creativity is a particular strength of Trinity, foregrounded across at least 3 schools: the School of English, the School of Languages, Literature and Cultural Studies, and the School of Creative Arts. And of course, through the Trinity Longroom Hub, the Oscar Wilde Centre, and the Trinity Centre for Literary and Cultural Translation. We're one of the 3 universities on the island to jointly run the Ireland Chair of Poetry Trust, and together with one of our benefactors, Stephen Vernon, we recently instituted the Pollard International Poetry Prize, now in its 3rd year. The great value of literary prizes is that they draw readers' attention to work that might otherwise get overlooked in a crowded field. And of course, they offer support to talent, both financial support and the oxygen of publicity. And that's certainly the effect of the Rooney Prize, which comes as such a boost to emerging writers. This is my last Rooney Prize as promised. Next year I step down from this role, so I'm feeling quite elegiac, and of course sorry not to be meeting with all of you in person. I'm an engineer who loves to isolate myself with a book, so this event was always one of the highlights for me of the year. Being Provost of Trinity, you never have much time for yourself, but luckily, because Trinity administers this prize, I can count on reading the winners each year of this essential work, and it gives me great pleasure to be introduced to authors I wouldn't otherwise come across. This year alone, in fact, it's been great for me to be able to be knowledgeable about some of our writers like Sarah Baum, Doreen Migriafa and Mark O'Connell, who've produced new books subsequent to winning the Rooney Prize, and these books have received a great deal of positive critical attention. I well remember the year that Doreen won in 2016, since that was the 40th anniversary of the prize. Elaine Niculinon gave a wonderful talk that night. It was a wonderful night overall and one of the highlights of my provostship. My congratulations to the judging committee for upholding the Rooney's long established reputation for spotting winners. Because of this reputation, people pay attention to the Rooney Prize. I imagine this year again, the winner will be doing a victory lap of interviews following the announcement. And hopefully that will lead to a great boost in sales. One great effect of this lockdown that we're all in is that we're all doing much more reading. And it's wonderful to be introducing an expanded audience to a remarkable new voice. The Rooney Prize really feels more relevant than ever. I know everyone is impatient to meet this year's winner. So without further ado, may I invite Carlo Gebler on behalf of the judging committee to give the citation. Carlo.
Good evening. I've read two pieces of work by Stephen Sexton. Oils is a 16-page pamphlet. Well, it's called a pamphlet. It's much weightier. Actually, it's an entire collection, as Anne Freud says in her introduction. Now, many things struck me about oils, and in no particular order. These include the author's incredible interest in culture, all of it. Lightness of tone, his presence as a human being. He's there in every word, in every full stop. I was also struck by the simultaneity, the way when I read it, I was in his now, in the things he was telling me, and I was inside everything that he brought to that now from the culture, from the universe. As I was reading, I found myself thinking about the Borges story, the Alf. Being Borges, the story features two Alfs, rather annoyingly. But what I thought about was not the first Alf, which is the one that's in a cellar in Buenos Aires, but the second Alf, which is reported by Richard Burton. He discovers it in a Cairo mosque, a great column of stone. And you put your ear to it, apparently, and you hear all the concurrent noises of the universe. And in its Sexton-y way, it's an Alf-like experience that Oils delivers. Finally, I must mention the author's relationship to his sources. He evokes them with supreme skill, and he honors them. And the honoring is in the evocation of their specificity. Stephen Sexton's second book, If All the World and Love Were Young, is a full-length work. It has all the virtues of Oils, plus a personal narrative, which mixes family genealogy, a filial narrative, and an amorous narrative. The plaiting of the personal into the rest of the content is flawless. It's also moving, engaging, and unsettling. The author I thought about particularly when I was reading If All the World and Love Were Young was the Cuban author Guillermo Cabrera Infante. In his childhood, an habitué of Havana's movie houses. In his novels, Cabrera Infante interlaces ephemeral cinematic experience with actual lived experience. And his stories have, because of this combination, a cine aesthetic, which communicates the sense of reality and non-reality, or fantasy and truth or lived experience as coexisting facts. In If All the World and Love Were Young, instead of the cinema screen, there is a console. And rather than 1940s Hollywood movies, what's playing or showing is Super Mario World, created by Nintendo for the 16-bit console. And I thought about Cabrera Infante reading If All the World and Love Were Young, because in his text, Stephen Sexton interlaces ephemeral 16-bit console Super Mario experience, it lives only in the memory, with actual lived experience. And the poems have this, I would say, 16-bit aesthetic, which communicates reality and non-reality as permanent coexisting truths. The 16-bit console had limited memory. It delivered what it had to deliver. And what we have in If All the World and Love Were Young is language, complex, beautiful, poetic language, as a 16-bit device might have delivered it. It's fluent, it's discrete, it's comma-free. There are no commas in this text, at least I didn't spot one. And because of what's missed, the information dropouts, if you like, it's a text full of the most incredible conjunctions and pairings. But what's lost doesn't register as loss, it registers as a gain, because in every line, we get something utterly new as a result of things being together, which regular, full syntax traditionally would have kept apart. We have produced in Ireland and in Northern Ireland many poets, many people who have facility with language and fluency, with meter and a vision and a voice. You know who I mean. These are great men and women. The reason for awarding Stephen Sexton the Rooney Prize for Literature for 2020, and the prize is not a prize for specific texts, it's a prize for promise based on the texts. The reason for awarding the prize to Stephen Sexton is because it was and is the committee's opinion that in him, we have a poet in the great Irish tradition, a poet of immense promise and huge reach, whom we expect will go on to greater things than he has already achieved. But until he does, if you haven't already done so, can I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to read what he has written to date. Thank you for listening. Mr. Rooney, you have the conch.
Thank you, Carlo. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us on our first ever Rooney Prize Zoom ceremony. And I can say definitively, hopefully it will be our last ever Zoom ceremony. I have to say though that I am delighted that we were able to do something to mark the occasion. So a very big thank you to everyone at Trinity who helped organize the virtual award ceremony this evening. I would also like to thank once again all of our judges. Each year they manage to pick the very best of Irish writing, which is not only great for our winner, but also maintains the Rooney Prize's reputation as one of Ireland's most coveted literary awards. I would like to thank Sasha Sykes for producing another phenomenal Rooney Prize trophy, which the winner will hold up in a moment. If you remember from last year, we encase the winner's book in a clear resin in the shape of a book, making each trophy unique to each year's winner. So have a look at that. Finally, I would like to thank the provost for being such a great friend to both the Rooney Prize and myself. You've always been so generous with the Provost's house and your time. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. And I do hope that you will continue to join us in the coming years. I would also like to give everyone some updates as to things that we've been working on over the past year. We are continuing to develop our social media presence with our Instagram and Facebook pages, and we now have close to 300 followers. We are in the process of developing a web page for the prize at rooneyprize.com. I would like to especially thank my niece Greta Gormley, who is here tonight, for being absolutely integral with all of our social media development. She has literally created all of these platforms from the ground up. So a very big thank you to Greta. She will likely at some stage be taking over this from me, so everybody be nice to her. We also have paired up once again with the Museum of Literature Ireland, or Mali, to have our winner participate in what we're calling Rooney Readings. Last year's winner, Mark O'Connell, was introduced by our 2018 winner, Katrina Lally, and then interviewed by our very own Carlo. This year's winner will be introduced by our 2016 winner, Doreen Negrifa, and again interviewed by Carlo. So it's a very exciting tradition that we started, so please keep an eye out for it. And thank you again to Carlo for your time and for always conducting such a fantastic interview. I think I also mentioned to you last year that there is a permanent Rooney Prize exhibition at the museum showcasing all of our winners' books. So please check that out once things open back up. And one final development that we are very excited about is a Rooney Writer Fellowship that John and I are supporting at the Trinity Long Room Hub. This fellowship will commence in September 2021 and will be awarded to an internationally respected writer who will take up residency in the hub, where they will have an opportunity to concentrate on their writing as well as interact with other fellows and students at the hub, providing an invaluable enhance of ideas and interest. I would especially like to thank both Jane Ohlmeyer and Eve Patton for all of their help in developing this fellowship. The work that they are doing at the hub is truly spectacular. So thank you, Jane and Eve. And now for the moment that we've all been waiting for. This year's winner has already been called the next Seamus Heaney. And no respect to Seamus Heaney, but I think that comparison does a slight disservice to our winner, whose poetic voice is so true to himself that it is distinctly unique. This collection of poetry intertwines images of pastoral landscape, childhood memories, motherly love, and yes, Super Mario World. If All the World and Love Were Young is a beautifully written, thought-provoking book of poetry. I'm a very big believer that complicated times sometimes require a poetic voice to help us understand them, and this collection of poetry does just that. It gives me great pleasure to present the 2020 Rooney Prize for Irish Literature to Stephen Sexton. Stephen?
Thank you so much, Peter. Allow me, if I may, to model this utterly beautiful trophy, and I want to talk a little bit about it in a minute, but can you see it? It is one of the most gorgeous things I've ever beheld. I'll show you the back. Isn't that marvelous? And I don't know if you can quite read it if I can get the light right, but yeah, the Rooney Prize is on the side of it. It is utterly gorgeous, Peter. It is wonderful. Thank you, and thank you, Provost, and thank you, Carlo, for this lovely evening. It would have been lovely if we could be there with each other, but you know, we don't need to say any more about that, I guess. What I would love to do is thank you all for being here, for sharing this part of your Tuesday night with us. It is very kind of you to do that. I'm delighted you're here. So I'm gonna say some thank yous for a little while, and then I'm gonna read 3 poems, I think, and yeah, I think that's all I'd like to say. Why don't I start, and whatever else comes to me, it will come to me. Don't worry, I think I owe some of you a little bit of an explanation with the whole Super Mario thing, but I'll get there in a minute. Yeah, I know, I'm not sure. So this has been the most extraordinary and joyous secret to keep. It is an extraordinary gift, and one that arrived entirely out of the blue on a night of tremendous rain in Donegal. It was July. In other words, Donegal did a perfect impression of itself. And it was electric to speak with Jonathan, and I hope I muttered almost coherently, trying to process what he was telling me. I hope I thanked him and the judges and Trinity. At least I can say thank you a little more coherently now. Thank you for spending time with my poems and for thinking so kindly and deeply about them. It means the world to me that these poems arrive with you how I hoped they might. I want to thank, of course, Peter Rooney and the Rooney family for establishing and supporting this marvelous award. To say it's coveted is to say the obvious and to repeat Peter, but it's also extremely prestigious, and it's matched in its prestige by remarkable generosity. Thank you. it matters very much. And I'm delighted to join the list of previous recipients. I'm particularly proud to call some of those previous recipients colleagues in Glenn Patterson and Leontia Flynn and Nick Laird. It's a great joy to join that marvellous list of writers. And thank you to Trinity College Dublin and to Sinead and Siobhan and Sabina for their kind and many preparations for this event, and to Sasha Sykes for making the wonderful trophy, a floating book. The book that Carlo spoke so kindly about with its long title, If All the World and Love Were Young, it wasn't me, that was Walter Raleigh, I borrowed that from. But it's a book that's deeply concerned with light, with the photograph, the television screen, the video game, radiotherapy, all kinds of light. And it's wonderful, therefore, to have the book suspended in its own block of light. And forgive me, but I can't resist noticing that trophy as a word comes from a Proto-European root meaning to turn, which means it isn't so far from verse, or Latin versus, to turn, and then it's not very far from verse, and then it's not very far from poetry. This is what I do with my time. And anyway, it seems to me what the whole business is about anyway, is connecting one thing to another, however improbable and however vast the distance between those things. Thank you to my editor, Maria Bedford at Penguin, and to my agent, Tracy Bohan and the Wiley Agency, and to Emma Wright of the Emma Press, and to these lovely pals in attendance, all of whom contributed so much to this book's success. And love and thanks to Bridge for, among everything else, taking some lovely pictures that I sent to you. And besides the people that I've mentioned, I want to thank Mark, at least I think his name was Mark. Mark is the courier who delivered this trophy to me. He drove, I think, from Carlo to Derry with this piece of cargo and back to Dublin without it. He called me in the afternoon and said he was nearby, and he was. And he drove up to the front door and I waved him down. He parked and got out and did what looked like a really good stretch. And rather than slide open the side door, he walked around to the passenger door and opened it, and I think might have unbuckled a seatbelt. I said it must have been a long drive. He said it was about 4.5 hours. I said, ouch. He handed me the box, supremely wrapped and marked fragile. He said, what is it? I dithered and I said it was a gift. He said, oh. In other circumstances, I might have offered him a cup of tea or coffee or something. I asked if he did this journey often, Dublin to Derry. He said this was the first time. And usually he'd have a few things to drop off along the way or to pick something up and bring it back. But today, only this box. And I thanked him again and wished him a good journey back. And then I felt kind of terrible because he's driven more than halfway across the country twice with a single mysterious box in the passenger seat, and he doesn't even get to know what's in it. And I'm sorry, Mark, but thank you very much, Mark. For a very long time, and now to some extent, I had no idea what this book was about or where it was going, but I'm pretty sure I wanted to go with it. I've said before that I started writing the book, half Mario, half something else, as something of a mischief, turning the ancient genre of pastoral poetry towards a video game, a digital landscape instead of a real one. Some kind of duty or something like it, or to labor this metaphor a little more, made me go the journey. And in my case, about a third of the way in, Drogheda approximately, I started to realize what I was writing, not really a book about Super Mario World, but an elegy pretending it wasn't an elegy. I thought Mario was the driver. It turns out he was the passenger. And more than that, it is mostly a book about looking out the window at the world and trying to understand how a holly tree in the garden is different from a holly tree on a TV screen. Lately, and now, we've spent a lot of time looking out into the world through various frames. For that reason, I'm especially touched by this trophy for how it adds another frame. In the way the book tries to find a frame, Super Mario, to deal with grief, this trophy puts a frame of light around the book and amulets it and keeps it. Thank you for it. So I'm going to read maybe 3 poems from towards the end of the book. And naturally and unfortunately, there aren't poems in this book that match the joy of our occasion, but I thank you with a very profound joy. Before I read those poems, I've got to say something. I don't know I don't know where I was starting. I thought it would be funny to write a book about Super Mario. I thought that would be kind of funny. And sooner or later, something else started creeping in. I was not simply writing a book about a video game. And it's one of the things that I especially want to thank you for, because I don't think this is necessarily an easy book. At various times, I thank people for it. I'm going to thank you again. The poems thank their readers for reading them. But I think especially that blend of the dizzying 16-bit existence versus the real world and its consequences. And I think it is a book that's trying to negotiate: is it better to stay in memory, or is it better to face what you're experiencing? And thank you, Carlo, again, for speaking so kindly of memory. Of the ridiculous syntax. I figured that there should be no commas because I didn't figure Nintendo knew what a comma was. I don't know, I could be wrong about that. But it didn't feel right. The comma as an interruption of time didn't seem quite right. But anyway, I'm going to read three poems. They all have kind of funny titles. And I'll just say very briefly, Mario runs left to right in his life. That's what he does. He jumps over things. He's in fantastic landscapes. He's a small Italian plumber who does his best to get to the end of the day. He's not entirely unlike Dante. I think a lot of Dante, another Italian man roaming around fantastic landscapes, trying to stay out of trouble. But yeah, not entirely different. But this is the part of the video game towards the end, and towards the end of my narrative here, where the video game kind of starts to acknowledge itself, and actually the poems start to acknowledge their making. So 3 not too long poems. Thank you all very much for being here for this lovely, joyful evening. I don't know how securely I can treasure this trophy. I'm going to wrap it up in a very good rug. I don't know where I can put it, but it is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Okay, 3 poems that hopefully speak in some way to what I've been saying. Gnarly. I tried to make a monument out of the pink wisteria, and to shape from the lands of light cartilage from cartography, from rolling green and glowing plains and 5-jointed springboard launchers and vines that beanstalk from a box, cumulonimbus, cirrus attended by sundogs, seen by ships at sea soon to sink, from forests of pupae furies of carnelian or ruby, from countless spiny crawling spites, duplicated as pathogens, from Osterberg and Orbison and Beethoven and 9-inch nails, from anthropomorphic stone heads in fortresses near, far and wide, from falling dreams, sweet streams that flow the length of the garden, planted with roses and honeysuckle, with foxgloves and wild funguses. I tried to make a monument from the cathode rays blasting streams of electrons behind a screen, from quarries, fox hunts and gunshots, from gillies dipped low in fleck tarn, scouting the forest on the hill. I want my monument to be composed of light, as you might say, so you can see it, friend. Not things themselves, but the seeing of them, the light stopping on them. Tree, I adore you. I adore you, world. Groovy. I tried to make a monument from the emptiness of the house in which everything starts, the berries and scarps, cactuses inching along in the verdure, mosses clinging to water pipes, but nothing would explain itself and things would only correspond. The house empty, but for me, is a highway in the wilderness, is a river in the desert, is a blue eye in the kettle, is a candle made of water, is a photograph on fire, is a church bell in the graveyard, is a letter I can't open, is a forest at Chernobyl, is a beached whale at Donegal, is fair-lined slippers for the cold, is buckles of the purest gold, is the fox hunt stalking the hen house, Is the fox guarding the hen house? Is the cat among the pigeons? Is the creek up in the rafters? When I returned to the empty house, it was no longer empty. One more. Funky. Not my titles. It's one of the useful things about basing it on something else. You have to do very little writing. Funky. The little sumo thunder gods, Shiko, little bolts of lightning. The sky storm dark as it has been these blue afternoons of winter. The garden is overgrowing. A gooseberry splits on my tongue, full of the thinking of robins, full of the odor of ozone. I traveled back to other storms, semi-breaths of rolling thunder, waiting finally for the flash. A gooseberry splits on my tongue and 16 years have disappeared. Thousands of berries in the trees, like Christmases, robins hop by, their breasts a swell of ground rubies. While the roses swell and recede, the begonias swell and recede. Homeless Saturn is halfway home. The beautiful television decomposes in a landfill. The hard ground softens, the soft ground softens the hard ground. The holly roots bristle suspended throughout. In the garden, I buried my name. I wanted it to be found. Should I pray to gods of thunder or the wounded gods of myself? The storm crumbles the bank into the river. And what can I say? This has not been easy. Thank you, friend. You are a super reader. Thanks, everyone.